Hey guys, JTP here again. We got part 3 of the Tekno EB48 2.1 build going on. This time we're jumping in with bags I, J, K. We're going to skip the shocks and do N. So basically getting into like a rolling chassis. We'll get the clips on. I got I all opened up here. So this is the Ackerman steering links, stuff like that. We'll also be throwing in JTP CT2 servo, getting the center diff in there. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll just jump on into it here. This is bag I, like I said. So I already got it opened up. But we'll go ahead and start building the servo saver. We got the front and the rear clips pretty much all done in the last part 2 video. This car is coming together really nice. Oh, you know what? I need wheel wrench. Well, I actually got that on my hand, but this actually fits a wheel wrench, which is super cool. Boom. If you guys notice, I got one of my favorite JTP shirts on today. It's got the UCI World Championship stripes, if you're familiar with cycling, just to celebrate my 2 World Championships. I love this shirt. I think I might bring it back or bring a new variation of this shirt. So 2023, keep an eye out for some new JTP apparel. Alright, so I'd normally tighten it all the way down and then back it off a half turn, which for some reason, oh, it really got stuck. Oh, I think it kind of lodged in the end of the spring or something. That thing was stuck. But I just do a half turn out. So all the way down, half turn out. Don't snug it all the way down like I just did, because it was darn near almost stuck. Alright, put some blue Loctite on these button head screws. They're going to be going through the Ackerman plate into the bell cranks. We got some bearings. There we go. And you got these nut inserts that will go through the bell cranks, and that's what the screw goes through the Ackerman plate. If you built Tekno 2.0s, this part that goes forward on the Ackerman plate, we ran the Ackerman plate the opposite direction. We always turned them around to change the Ackerman. So in the 2.1, it actually says to do the part that sticks up more towards the front of the car. So that's what we're going to do as we build this. Alright, we got the servo saver side on. Now we'll do the other side. Remember to wipe off any excess Loctite. So that you don't make a mess, get it inside those bearings or anything like that. bind it up. These you can pretty much tighten down. Not gonna have to worry. Everything's good and free. We'll go ahead, pop the bearings in, and then we'll set that aside. Pop the balls here into our rod ends for the steering links. Always put the ball through the side that has the molding ring around it. There we go. I got my Lunsford steering links here. Get some grease on those threads. It's kind of like I've always talked about. Go a couple turns in. Get your rod in nice and straight, and then you can go the rest of the way. Oop. Like I do with all my rod ends. I go right about to where the threads start, just so I can have a good judge of having these nice and centered. You want to have these nice and centered so that if you, the steering links don't change that much, but for camber links, when you start moving locations, say you go to a shorter link and your turnbuckle is going to be pretty far inside of your tie rod, you want to make sure that they're the same side to side, so if it's a tight fit, that you don't have one going all the way in and it's bottoming out so you can't go any tighter, and one side you have extra room. And same thing if you go to a longer camber link where you might have some threads showing. You don't want a lot more threads showing on one side, not much on the other side, just to have, might cause a failure or something like that. So you always want to try to have these as centered as you possibly can. And for the steering link, you're going to have the ends going the same direction. Sometimes these steering links, it's a little bit more tricky to get centered because you can't do like a half turn. Everything's got to be a full turn because these links need to be both facing up. But there we go, we're pretty centered. I'll take that, it's close enough. Alright, so now we'll start on the other side. These rod ends are the same on both sides, so I don't need to worry about my direction of the turnbuckle until I go and put them on. Alright, got that one nice and straight. And just like that, we got stinking bag eye just about finished. We'll probably go ahead and mount these steering links to the Ackerman plate before we move on. Let's see. I think that's going to be pretty close. Yep, pretty close, good and centered. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and just put this on. So I'm going to put it where the front is in front of me. That's how I always look at my car, right side, left side, just so I know, so I can get these turnbuckles going the correct direction. And this is going to be our right side. This is going to be our left side. So I'm going to put a washer, go through the ball. I'm going to do my setup. I run 2 washers on the Ackerman and 2 washers on the steering plate. So that's just kind of how I run my bump steer. We'll take a look. That bearing's just going to keep falling out, so I'm not even going to worry about it. Washer. You want to run a washer before you go through the ball, just so that that ball won't pop off. Run in the middle, whoops, the middle location. Which I think that's what the kit probably says, or the manual, I should say. I'll bust out the manual here in a second, and we'll look at it. We'll see what the bump steer washers are in the manual, but I'm pretty sure mine's a little bit different. I don't like a whole lot of bump steer. I like my wheels to stay as straight as possible through the travel. When I have too much bump steer, I have a hard time jumping really accurate. So I kind of, you know, jump across, jump faces a lot, not always hitting perfectly straight. So when you have bump out, if you're going a little bit of angle, sometimes I feel like my car will jump not super accurate for me. Alright, we got a couple extra shims, which is nice. Man, knocking tools off the table to start out. Let's see here. Go to I, H, I. Yeah, it says 4 on the inside, and it shows no washer before you go through the ball. So I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should definitely have a washer, just so that ball can't, just so your rod end won't pop off that ball, which it could very, you know, it can definitely do that. So definitely put a washer there. I'm just going to do 2 for my bump steer. We got I, and now we'll open up J. Let's see, I think with J, it's going to have us probably put the steering posts on and put the front end on, which is pretty cool. Can really start looking like a car now. Alright, so we'll do the body mount. Front body mount. Do the front little top deck piece here. Got that on. We'll grab our chassis. These are going to be steering post screws. Put some blue Loctite on those. Rub my fingers on the Loctite a little bit. Put the steering post on. These steering posts key into the chassis, so they're not fully round on the bottom. They key in nicely to the chassis, so so that they don't move, which is nice. Get those nice and tight. Alright. I'm going to put this bearing on first since it will not stay. There we go. Get that on there. Boom. Now, put the front end on. Nice. Got the longer screws go on the top there. Since I got that 2.0 bit in, I'll go ahead and just put these in first. Oops. These bigger screws, I'm actually gonna put a little bit of grease on these screws. There's the threads, gonna be starting new threads, and I said they've changed the material a little bit on these bulkheads. Just like all the plastic pieces, I don't like to run them all the way in, even when you're using these bigger screws. After I get the threads in, yeah, see, that one's barely even going. I might take my clutch off. There we go. Put some grease in there. A little too much. And finish them off by hand. Once these threads are put in, I mean, you can run these in if you have your, clutch not set too high, and you probably aren't going to strip these out. But when I'm first putting these on, I don't want to run these all the way in, just because, it's just not really worth it. Definitely don't want to strip out a bulkhead on your brand new car. That's not that cool. Boom, just like that. A little grease popped out. Just like that. Front end is on, man. This thing's looking awesome. I'm gonna go ahead then, put the top deck on. These front screws are still going into plastic, so no Loctite there, but these back screws are going to go into the steering post, so those will get some Loctite. Those will be these guys here. A little bit of blue Loctite. Run those through my fingers. You don't want to get them in the bearings or anything like that. Get my clutch back on. Those, since they're going into aluminum, I'll go ahead and just use the clutch. Also check them. Everything's still moving nice and free. Definitely want these top ones pretty tight. Those seem like on new cars, sometimes those loosen up a little bit too for some reason. Alright, now we got front chassis brace. Nice, that's looking awesome there. So everything's free. We're almost all the way through this bag. Now we're gonna mount the steering link onto the spindle here. You're gonna do another washer on the screw so that you have a washer going up against the carbon fiber. And for my bump steer, I do 2 on the outside as well. So 2 on the inside, 2 on the outside. And then I do an extra steel washer on top, and then my flange nut. Go ahead and do that on the other side. Steel washer, so it goes up against the carbon fiber. 2 bump steer washers. The rod end. Another steel washer. And a nut. Oh, I'll need that again shortly, I guess. There we go. Voila, just like that. Front end is on. It's starting to look like a race car now. So I think that was J and K, or that was I and J, I believe. Now we'll move on to K. Open up this bag. So this looks like we'll be putting the center diff in and the motor mount. Alright. I'm getting it ready for the rear end to go on. Alright, let's see what we have here. Get my screws together. I know that's going to be part of my center diff. We'll check. Oh, this is going to have me put the rear end on because it's got the screws for the rear end to go on, which are those right there. And let's see, those. This is going to be an extra screw. Alright. Let's see what screws. Let's first see what screws it calls for where. Pretty sure I know, but actually I know what screws go where. These are going to be for the motor mount, center diff. These are for chassis braces, but we're not going to put these on. So I don't run any chassis braces on the rear. we'll go ahead, we'll start with the engine, with the motor mount, motor mount here. It's going to use these 3 screws. I'm going to actually do red Loctite for this part, because you don't want the motor mount coming loose. All the torque of the Tekin motor that I'm going to be putting in this bad boy will just loosen these motor mounts right up. So we're going to do some red Loctite, run that through my fingers, make sure this Loctite is all in the threads. There we go. Alright, motor mount. Got the 3 mounting locations. I'm just going to get these all started by hand. And I want these extra tight, because I don't want these moving. Don't really ever plan on pulling this motor mount off, so I don't really care if those things are stuck onto that chassis. Alright, now we do the rear. So use these shorter screws. Alright, gotta get those holes lined up. There we go. Pop that center diff in. You'll see when you pop these center diffs in that they'll actually rock forward and back quite a bit. So what I do, I normally get a couple diff shims. We'll try 3 on here. I do it on the aluminum side, not on the back side. So on the spur gear side, I'll put some diff shims on there. And 3, I think it's too much. I'm going to take 1 off, if I can. Yep, take 1 off. Sometimes you gotta use like a 1.5, kind of help it go in there. There we go. Yep. And now, since I have it in there, I'm gonna just hold it, because it can be a little bit of a pain. I'll show you the movement after. And this other screw goes into the engine mount, so I'm going to put Loctite on both of those. Get it nice and in the threads. Sorry, try not to block your view with my arm here, but snug those down a little bit. So I wanted to just see how that fits in there, how it spins, if it moves back and forth. It's not moving too much. I think I'm actually just going to do 1 shim. So that was just kind of a test fit. I think I'm going to end up just doing one shim. Just to take a little bit out. Now this time I'm going to throw the drive shaft in. Yeah, there we go. It's got a little bit of front to back, but not as much as it had to start, so. There we go. Had the screw still in. That one's almost all the way in. Put this other one on the back here. Now, since I'm not running a chassis brace in the center here, they give you this little spacer that you slide in to replace the space there. I put the 4mm button head in. Now I can go ahead, tighten these all down. Center diff is tighter feeling in there, not rocking back and forth a bunch. Drivetrain, nice and free. This front toe, it's driving me crazy, so I'm gonna adjust these. Probably go right till about the threads are totally gone. I didn't measure these, so they're not exactly the same. I'll measure them later. We'll just get it kind of in the ballpark so it's not quite so annoying to me. There we go. That's looking better. Alright, so we got front end on, we got the center diff in. Let's now move to get the rear end on. I'm not going to be using the rear chassis brace either, but I'll still put this chassis brace mount on the back just so it's there. Whoops. There we go. Nice. Got that on. So, not going to be using those. Oh, I'm going to need my grease because I'm going to put a little bit of grease on these screws that are going to go into the rear bulkhead. There we go. Now, going to be putting the rear end on. Make sure I get my drive shaft in there. Alright, and actually I'm gonna do these other bolts first, these other screws. So I'm gonna do the bolts with the 2.0. Screws, not sure why I'm calling them bolts all of a sudden. You'll see why in just a second. Put blue Loctite on the screws going into the C plate, or C block. Snug those down. You want to be careful with those. Those are tricky screws on these cars because you need to use Loctite. They'll back out sometimes and then they'll get bent over. But if you really tighten these down, you won't be able to get them out and you'll strip out your screw head. So that's kind of a tricky screw there. But just put some blue Loctite on it and just kind of keep an eye on those. Got these cool Tekno steel skid plates. So that's why I needed to put those. Need to put those screws in first because the skid plate will cover over them. Got my grease on these threads. Change my chuck here back to the 2.5. Take out my clutch, back it out, go back in. There we go. These skid plates are pretty cool. If you plan on using one, I would definitely recommend starting with it on with a brand new chassis. You don't want kind of the back of the chassis to wear and then you put a skid plate on because you'll have a little bit of like a gap right here. So just start with a skid plate if you're planning on running one. I would recommend it. It definitely probably triples your chassis life, I would say. The Tekno chassis kind of wear faster than most cars, kind of right from here back for some reason, so the back can get pretty thin, and these skid plates really help with that. You can just get a couple extra ones. When you buy the kit, when you buy the package of skid plates, it comes with 2. You'll want to replace them, you know, after, I would say 1 skid plate probably lasts longer than 1 whole chassis before, but you do need to replace the skid plates every once in a while. Put those extra screws up, and just like that, yeah, we're done with that bag. We got stinking rolling chassis, looks like. So let's jump in. Let's see what we got going on in bag N. We're gonna skip L, the shocks. We'll do that in the next part, part 4. So we'll jump into bag N, and it looks like we're putting the servo in, and the ESC, and the battery tray, and the motor. So let's jump into that. we're back, guys. We're here working on back in. I got everything opened up now, and we'll just jump in, start putting some of this stuff together. We're going to be putting the servo in. We're going to be putting a new Tekin ESC that I put the black case on. I'll show you guys how I solder all my wires on. We'll be putting in this Tekin T8 G3 1900 motor, and yeah, let's just kind of jump into it. I think first thing we can do is put this new servo in. Crack the case on this thing. See if I can get it out of here. Maybe. It's haha, there we go. Boom. Love that artwork on that case. There we go. Freshy CT2 servo. Alright, let's get this baby in. Put my wire in. Make sure you know which direction your servo is going to be going. So the spline needs to go towards the center of the car. So that's what we got going on here. And then this mount has this little guide. You run your wire out, you go around that post, go through that guide, which works out nicely. And I use some flathead screws to put my servos in, not the cap head screw with the washer, as the manual will call. So I like the self-centering flathead screws so that your servo doesn't move around at all. Not sure why I use those screws. I forgot. I got some sweet tie screws. Forgot all about my tie screws sitting over here. Silly me. I don't use a ton of tie screws in my builds anymore, but I like to use them in a couple of spots. They just look super cool. Save some weight. I don't get too crazy with it. I don't use them everywhere. Just some spots. They look awesome holding the servo down though. Get this thing all nice and centered with these flathead screws. Just kind of self-centers them. There we go. Looking good. Alright, so we got that ready. We can go ahead, just kind of put the lid on this. I'll use some tie screws here on the receiver box lid as well. We'll start putting some stuff on the chassis. So we do side guards. Get those bad boys on. Those are going to be all these screws here. A bunch of these screws. Those right there are going to hold this ESC tray down. So I'll put a little bit of Loctite on those. Let's see, how many of these screws? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 on each side. So we need 8 of these. I'll go ahead, put some blue Loctite on those. I was a little worried. I was like, uh-oh, hope I'm not out. Alright. We'll go ahead and put this side on first. Rub that Loctite through my fingertips. There we go. Got one more. Since we're working on this side of the car, I guess we can go ahead and do the battery straps. So this, you gotta make sure that you do this part correctly. And let's see, I want this part coming up the front. This is going to loop through. So I'm going to start on the front one, going down. So that's going to be at the end. Then this will loop through, going up. And that should be correct, I think. Pretty sure. Get my 2.5 bit on here. Alright, line these up. I run a full-size pack, so putting these in the farthest outside holes. Go. Make sure those holes are lined up on the front. All right, let's see if we did that right. I think we did. So it's going to come up and loop through. Boom! You can read the Tekno. That is how we want it. So there we go. Got those on. Now we'll move over to this side. Let's switch our bit back. We'll just do the receiver box first. Receiver box is way in the back of the car. All right. Those holes lined up. There we go. Receiver box is in. Now we will go ahead, put the servo in, make sure our wire is fitting all the way through the little channel. Do these screws in the back here. Now, go ahead, put these screws into the servo mount through the bottom. Maybe. There we go. Sometimes when you do the centering screws on the top, you need to actually loosen these up a little bit to get the servo mount in the bottom. All the servos are a little bit, just a tiny bit different. So actually when I tightened those down, I was kind of pulling those mounts a little bit so my holes weren't lined up very well. So I'll loosen my servo, get the mounts through the bottom, tighten those up, and then I can go ahead and tighten it back down at the top. Not going to cause any issues there, it's just a plastic mount. You know, moves around a little bit. There we go. Alright, got those. Now we'll go back on the top, tighten these back down. Alright, so I say next step, let's jump in, solder some wires on this bad boy. Alright guys, we got our ESC. I got some wires cut to length here. I'm going to show you how I get the shrink wrap off. Just use some scissors, go around. This will be the side that goes on the ESC. And then what we're going to do is I'll put them all on the edge of my table here. Just like so. Clean my tip on my iron. Now, just going to get some solder on all these wires. after I get it, you can see the solder is just on one side. I'm going to hold the iron there, kind of rotate it around, go on the back side, hold it under the bottom. Try to get that solder to work through all those wires. Might need to add some. Might need to add a little bit to all of them. And there we go. Want all of the wires coated in the solder. Alright, this one's looking good now. Let's see this one. You want solder all the way through so you don't get any cold solder joints, which is where it's just kind of soldered like around the edges and it's not all the way completely through. Go on the bottom side, we'll pull that solder through all the wires. Alright, I think those are all looking pretty good. Now I'm going to head over to the ESC, add some solder on all these tabs. Go. You want solder in and around the whole tab here. Not too much because I have a good amount of solder on the wires, but you want it all the way around on the bottom and going up all the way towards the top, just so you can get a complete solder joint. Try to keep all the solder inside the tab so it's not running down or going on the back side or anything like that. Alright, that one just needs a little bit more. There we go. This one needs a tiny bit more. There we go. So now you can see got solder in all the tabs. All my wires are ready. I'm going to go ahead, clean my tip off, and make sure I know which ones are which. So these are all my motor wires here. These are going to be my two battery wires. I'm going to add a little bit of solder to those back wires actually. I have some red shrink tubing on, actually it's more shrink wrap, on my positive. So I like to do the battery ones just to kind of get them out of the way. So this is going to be the positive. Don't need to push super hard. If you have enough solder on there, the solder should just melt through, heat it up. You shouldn't really need to push. Just hold it there. There we go. There's one solder joint for the positive battery lead. Now I'll go ahead and do the negative. There we go. Try to have the leads pretty straight up and down, so I got that last one a little bit crooked. I'll try to straighten that up a little. There we go. You want a solder joint that's pretty shiny still. It shows that you have all the solder all the way through, and it's going to be a good and solid solder joint. I'll let that cool for a second. Alright, now we'll do the motor wires. I did these all the same length, so they're a little bit on the long side, so they can go anywhere. I'm going to put a little solder on my soldering tip there. We'll start over here on C. Go to A. Finish off in the center with B. There we go. Got all the wires soldered on. Looking pretty good. Let's go ahead, put this thing in the car. We're back. We got the Tekin RX8 Gen 3 ESC all ready to go into the car. We got the wires soldered on the ESC. We got servo tape and some gel tape underneath just to be a little extra cautious. Got my Tekin short sensor wire. So now we can go ahead, put this bad boy in the car. I can get this off. There we go. Alright. Try to get it nice and straight. Oh yeah, that looks awesome. I give myself just a little bit of room in between the ESC and the servo. Alright, that's pretty good there. Now, I think our next step should be doing the next side guard. So, it has some guides for the wires to run through, which it's a little tricky sometimes to get all the wires in there properly. There we go. Alright, so I got the wires through some. I'm going to go ahead, put some of these screws in. Get them lined up. The front two screwed all the way down. Now, pull these wires through a little bit. There we go. Just need to get them through this last one. These guides are cool. They can be a little annoying sometimes, but when your receiver box is all the way in the back of the car, you know, they want it to be nice and clean looking. Ah, there we go. Alright, so there you can see the wires are all through the guides. We got one last screw to do. There we go. Guess I don't really need a lid on this. Alright, let me get some foam. Alright, got some foam that I'm going to lay in here. Put some foam in the receiver box. For now, I'm just going to put the wires in there and put the lid back on. Alright, we're looking good to go. Next thing to do is put the motor in. So, we're going to have some cap head screws here. These are the motor mount screws. Alright, so it uses 3mm screws to mount the motor mount. So these Tekin motors, they have 4mm screws, 3mm screw holes. So you gotta use the 3mm. We're gonna use these holes. It goes in that way. You know, I've never actually looked at the manual to see if it says to put your motor in the lower position or the upper position. I'll be curious to actually look into that. I put mine where it mounts the motor in the lowest position. Let's see what the manual says. Motor install. It says to put it in the upper position. I don't know. I put mine in the lower position. Maybe that's why I get some dents in my chassis from my motor. Who knows? Alright. Let's see. Oh yeah, there we go. That's gonna fit in there nicely. I'm gonna pull it back out so I can plug in my sensor wire here. That all the way plugged in. There we go. Now, Gonna put in the screws through the top. Make sure to get all the excess Loctite off. If you get Loctite kind of down in those, down on the aluminum where it slides in and out, you might have a little hard time sliding this motor mount around. There we go. There we go. Slides in and out. Good. Alright. Next step here is gonna be soldering the motor and the battery. Alright guys, we're back. We got the battery in now. We got the motor in. Gonna start soldering the motor. Got the iron nice and hot. I'm gonna start off with putting solder on the motor tabs. I've found that the Tekin motor tabs need a little bit more kind of heating up and just a little bit more time with the iron on the actual tab to really get the solder stay on there. So I put some solder under the tip of the iron, get that tab nice and hot, kind of move it around. You can see got some good solder on there now. I'm going to be doing one motor wire at a time because I'll be cutting them to length as we go. Get some solder on this wire. Kind of do the same thing like I did when we soldered the wires on. Get some pliers here so I can hold the wire on. The thing's gonna get hot. Don't want to push too hard. Let the heat go through, and then because you don't want to flatten your wires too much. Then we'll just add a little solder. There we go. Want it to be nice and shiny. It's a little tricky soldering at this angle with just the way that the motor mount works here. That's just kind of the angle that it ends up being. You can't really have it go straight up and down. Alright, so now we're going to cut the B wire. I like to twist the ends of my wires just to keep them clean, keep them tidy. Add some solder here. Make sure it's all the way through. Alright, so this is the B to B. Same thing, don't push too hard. Let the heat go through. It's looking pretty good. Add a little bit more solder to that. Like I said, it's a little tricky with this angle here. If I had someone helping me, you could hold the car on its side like that and get it on there, but that's still a good solder job, nice and shiny still. You want to make sure that you don't have any solder kind of bubble down and touch, because if any solder gets in between these tabs, then you'll have a short and it won't work, so you'll have to resolder it. Alright, last motor wire here. Let's see. That looks pretty good. Definitely wouldn't say I'm the cleanest when it comes to doing my doing my wires and such. I feel like I do a good job soldering. Don't really have any issues. They look decent. Not that good at hiding wires or trying to make my wiring job look super fancy. Don't get too fancy with my soldering either, but I feel like I do a decent job. Alright, so now we are on C to C. Let it heat up. It's pretty cool. You can see it just start melting through and melting together, which is pretty neat. I'm going to add just a little bit more. There we go. There we go. Got the 3 motor wires on. Clean the tip off here. I'm pretty happy with that. Looks pretty clean. Goes up over the top of the ESC. And now we're going to do the battery wires. So let's see. I'm going to run this one underneath and this one like that. So I'm actually going to shorten my positive one just a little bit. Alright, that's pretty good. I'm going to show you guys a little trick. I use a 7mm nut driver. Oh, actually, at these ends I can't use a 7mm. Thought I used to use that one. Maybe I always use these Kyosho wrenches. There we go. I always use my Kyosho wrench actually. I thought that MIP would be the same, but it's not. So I'm always doing my work down here myself. So sometimes you gotta come up with some creative tools. So I got that wrench to hold the bullet plug. I'm gonna go ahead, put some solder in the top. Just fill that up. That looks pretty good. Go ahead and get some solder on the battery wire. These solder joints are really critical. You want a really good, nice solder joint. Alright, so we got solder on both sides there. So now, the tricky part, when you're by yourself and you don't have 4 hands, I'm going to get this wire sticking straight out. I'm going to go ahead, put my pliers on it. I got my solder in there. I'm going to go add a little bit more solder to the wire. There we go. And then these plugs, you have a little opening on one side. So I have the wire go through that opening there. Don't push too hard, just let the heat come through. You'll see it all start to melt. There we go. It's smoking right up in my face. Boom. There we go. Nice, super clean. You want it to be real shiny looking because that's when you know you have a good solder joint. So there's our positive. Now we'll do the negative. So same thing. I'm gonna go get my wrench kind of balanced in there. Clean the tip off. Get some solder going in. Make sure this thing don't fall over. Whew. Seems like no matter what angle I go, I got the solder going right in my face. Now I'm gonna get solder on the wire. Get a lot of solder on there. Make sure it's all the way around. Alright, we're looking good. We're gonna do the plier trick. Bend that thing so it's nice and straight. A little more solder. There we go. Get it through the opening. Just let the heat do its thing. Oh yeah. Boom. There we go. Nice solder joint. I'm gonna wait to plug those in because the plugs are still super hot. I can plug this positive one in. Make sure we're lined up good. Oh yeah. That looks great. This one still pretty hot. I want to run it under like that. And let's see how it looks. A little spark. And there we go. Nicely done. We are soldered in, ready to go. Alright guys, we got the ESC motor, battery, servo. The car's looking really good. We got the clips on. I'm gonna call this for part 3. Join back in for part 4 where we do the shocks and then we do the ESC settings and we get the ride height, camber, get the servo connected, and yeah, get this thing ready to hit the track. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys are enjoying these videos. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Click on the notification so that you see when new videos are coming. And thanks again for the support. Couldn't do it without you guys.